Eternal corruption. This editorial addresses Pakistan's corrupt bureaucracy and ineffective anti-corruption measures. A couple of phrases in Urdu aptly sum up Pakistan's entire governance model. A couple of phrases is an idiomatic expression meaning a few short sayings. Aptly sum up means to perfectly capture or summarize. The first is file ko wheels lagana, attaching wheels to a file, which implies the greasing of palms in order to get things done in a government department. File ko wheels lagana is an Urdu idiom meaning to grease palms, i.e. to bribe officials to expedite work. Greasing of palms is a common metaphor for bribery. The second is file kapai barna, which implies stuffing a file with relevant and irrelevant details so that the matter under the spotlight turns ambiguous and thus it becomes difficult to find the proverbial devil in the details in this case. Approving the proposal is found to be the only option. File kapai barna is an idiom meaning to overfill a file with excessive details. Devil in the details is a figure of speech suggesting that small, obscure elements can hide major problems. Not many who are known as the competent authority are in the habit of reading more than a few pages, sometimes just a few lines of a case that is put up to them for approval. Competent authority is a formal term for those with decision-making power. This sentence uses understatement to criticize officials for their superficial review of documents. At best, our most well-read bureaucrats might be mindful of things that are reported by an investigative journalist or an op-ed writer who takes pains to weave a story out of a news item and then analyses it. Takes pains is an idiomatic expression meaning makes a great effort. Weave a story is a metaphor for constructing a narrative from disparate information. So the stuffing of files almost always gives the impression of a pressing need for approval, while the reality is that the justifications that are provided for most plans that many civil servants make to apparently maximize personal benefits using government funds are more often than not fiction. Stuffing of files refers back to file kapait barna, implying unnecessary over-detailed paperwork. Maximize personal benefits hints at self-serving corruption, and fiction here is a hyperbolic way to say that these justifications are fabricated. Will the IMF demand prove an exercise in futility? This rhetorical question employs exercise in futility as an idiom, meaning an effort that is doomed to fail. A recent example is the plan to purchase vehicles worth billions of rupees by the Federal Board of Revenue. When an example is introduced to illustrate the point, worth billions of rupees emphasizes the scale of the expenditure. The plan was leaked to social media, which led a Senate Standing Committee to demand justification from the FBR for such an exorbitant spending spree. Exorbitant spending spree uses hyperbole to describe wildly excessive expenditure. Demand justification is a formal phrase, meaning to require an explanation. The latest in the matter is that the process has been halted till a probe into the justification of the demand and transparency of the process is completed. One can rightly ask if the process has been halted to stuff the file and to get approval as soon as the dust settles. The semicolon connects related ideas. Stuff the file echoes the earlier idiom. File kapait barna. Get approval as soon as the dust settles is an idiomatic expression meaning to secure approval quickly once the confusion clears. The justification provided by the FBR chief before the Senate committee that the vehicles are necessary to identify non-filers by visiting markets across the country appears flimsy. Flimsy means weak or unconvincing. This sentence criticizes the reasoning given by the FBR chief. If the plan is to catch tax evaders by sitting around in shops and observing the number of glasses the lassi-wala sells every morning, then I am not very hopeful. This sentence employs sarcasm and hyperbole, using the image of a lassi-wala, a vendor of a traditional drink, to ridicule the proposed method of tax enforcement. This brings us to another useless plan to curb corruption. Brings us to is a transitional phrase. Useless plan is a blunt, dismissive statement. This time, the organization behind the plan is an international one, the IMF. The sentence contrasts domestic corruption with an international effort, highlighting the irony. To fulfill the conditions set by the fund, the government has recently amended the Civil Servants Act, making it mandatory for civil servants to declare their assets and to make these details public. Fulfilling the conditions means meeting specific requirements. Declare their assets is a standard legal term for publicly listing personal wealth. Perhaps the IMF does not know that in Pakistan, you can find frontmen a dime a dozen to provide legal cover to ill-gotten wealth. A dime a dozen is an idiomatic expression meaning very common. Ill-gotten wealth refers to money obtained through corrupt or illegal means. Civil servants do not need to keep assets in their own name, and the wealth that is stashed abroad by some does not even count. This criticizes loopholes in asset declaration laws. Stashed abroad is informal language, meaning hidden or kept overseas. It should be simple to figure out that not coming clear about your assets is a lot easier for an individual who has already sold his conscience. Sold his conscience is a metaphor implying that a person has abandoned ethical principles in exchange for personal gain. It is pertinent to point out that any international organization would be living in a fool's paradise if it believed that it can achieve through legislation what internal intelligence organizations have failed to achieve, despite their unchecked authority and innumerable resources. Fool's paradise is an idiomatic expression meaning a state of blissful ignorance. Unchecked authority implies power exercised without oversight, and innumerable resources emphasizes vast capabilities. Would the IMF demand proven exercise in futility? This repetition of the earlier rhetorical question reinforces the skepticism about the effectiveness of such international demands. This brings us to the recent remarks made by an apex court judge while hearing the petition of a civil servant who was denied promotion due to unsatisfactory reports by the intelligence agencies that said he is financially corrupt and involved in corrupt practices. He is a shrewd sick person who can't handle pressures, and the officer does not carry fair reputation vis-a-vis financial integrity, without giving further details. The long sentence introduces judicial criticism of intelligence reports. Apex court refers to the highest court. The quotes are examples of vague, unsubstantiated allegations. The second indicates an error in the original text. The judge pointed out that the allegation was neither substantiated by any proof or further details, and was critical of the causal format of the intelligence reports. This sentence highlights the judge's criticism regarding the lack of evidence and clarity in the reports. It is true that reports by intelligence agencies can be arbitrary. Arbitrary means based on random choice or personal whim, rather than any reason or system. I do agree that they can be misused, and many readers would also support this observation, given the disdain we have heaped upon the intelligence apparatus. This sentence expresses general consensus on the misuse of intelligence reports, with heaped upon being an idiomatic expression, meaning poured out in abundance. However, one can also play the devil's advocate and ask if any reader can produce a receipt of the bribe they paid to get an electric meter, or a gas meter connection, or any other seemingly trivial matter. Devil's advocate is an idiomatic expression for arguing a counterpoint for the sake of debate. Receipt of the bribe is used metaphorically to question the proof of corruption in everyday transactions. They say change is eternal. In Pakistan, we say corruption is eternal and is surely here to stay. Change is eternal is a philosophical statement. The contrasting phrase corruption is eternal is used as a wry, pessimistic counterpoint. So let's just stuff the files and live in style. Stuff the files refers back to file kapate barna, suggesting that bureaucrats continue their corrupt practices unabated. Live in style is an ironic call to accept and even embrace the system despite its flaws. The writer is a former civil servant. Syed Sadat writes at gmail.com, X at Syed Sadat 55, published in Dawn, February 18, 2025.